He was invisible to most, just a quiet kitchen worker, moving trays and wiping tables while the powerful men in tailored suits made their deals. But when the billionaire CEO spoke, the entire room froze. No one understood a word. Whispers turned to laughter, and all eyes searched for someone, anyone, who could bridge the silence. No one expected the answer to come from the man they had overlooked all along. What happened next not only silenced the room, it shattered their idea of who truly belongs. Marcus never stood out in the grand offices where billion-dollar deals were made. He was the kitchen helper, quiet, efficient, invisible. Every morning before dawn, he slipped into the skyscraper, through the service entrance, dressed in a crisp white uniform, carrying the weight of 2 jobs and a dream he rarely spoke of. For him, this work wasn't just about serving food. It was about providing for his mother back home, about dignity, about survival. Inside the glittering boardrooms, the men of power barely noticed him. Their conversations were in languages he didn't understand, their watches worth more than his yearly salary. Still, Marcus observed everything, the tension in their voices, the arrogance in their laughter, the way silence often followed when someone new entered the room. He knew his place, or at least, that's what everyone assumed. But on that morning, the atmosphere was different. A Chinese billionaire CEO had flown in for a high-stakes meeting. Suits shuffled nervously. Translators fumbled with words, and the air buzzed with discomfort. No one could follow his rapid-fire Mandarin. The room brimmed with unease, prestige hanging on every misunderstood sentence. Marcus stood at the back, a tray balanced in his hands, watching it unfold. He wasn't supposed to be part of this world, not in any way that mattered. Yet, without warning, the line between servant and savior was about to blur, and nothing would ever be the same. The boardroom was a fortress of wealth and pride, its polished table gleaming under the light, every detail designed to remind outsiders of power. Marcus stood near the edge, tray in hand, his presence barely acknowledged. To them, he was part of the furniture, silent, replaceable, unseen. But silence filled the air for another reason now. The billionaire Chinese CEO's voice carried across the room, sharp and commanding in rapid Mandarin. His words were powerful, but none of the executives could grasp their meaning. The translators faltered, stuttering over phrases, leaving gaps of confusion that spread like cracks through the polished facade of control. Uneasy laughter broke out, forced and nervous. Some whispered that maybe the man was insulting them. Others suggested waiting for another interpreter. The CEO's eyes narrowed, his frustration rising, his voice hardening. Tension rippled across the table, every executive shifting uncomfortably. For men who were used to controlling every room they entered, being powerless was unbearable. That was when Marcus noticed the stares, not at the CEO, but at him. It began subtly. A glance here, a smirk there. One of the younger executives leaned back and whispered something to the man beside him, both chuckling as their eyes flicked to Marcus. The message was unspoken but clear. What could someone like him possibly understand? Marcus felt his throat tighten. He had lived with that look. His whole life, the kind that reduced him to his uniform, his skin, his position. He told himself to focus on the tray in his hands, to keep his head down. But the words flowing from the CEO struck something deep inside him. The rhythm, the cadence. It wasn't foreign to him at all. He knew this language. He had studied it late at night, balancing textbooks over weary eyes, believing that knowledge could build a bridge to a better future. Still, doubt screamed louder than courage. If he spoke, they would laugh. If he stayed silent, the meeting would crumble. He felt the weight of history pressing against his chest, the countless times people like him had been told to stay in the background, to know their place. The CEO's voice rose sharply, his frustration now boiling over. He slammed his hand on the table, and the sound echoed like a gunshot. Every executive flinched. The room was teetering on collapse. Marcus's heart pounded. His lips parted, but he hesitated. Would anyone even believe him? Would they listen? He glanced around the room, at the smirks, the dismissive eyes, the impatience, radiating from men in $1,000 suits. His entire life had taught him to remain invisible. But this moment demanded otherwise. He took a quiet breath, summoning courage he didn't know he still had. The words of the CEO replayed in his mind, clear as day. Slowly, carefully, Marcus spoke, his voice low, steady, in flawless Mandarin. The tray trembled slightly in his hands as the room froze. Forks stopped mid-air. Chairs creaked in disbelief. Dozens of powerful men stared, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock, to something else entirely. And in that silence, Marcus realized he had just crossed a line no one ever expected him to cross. For a heartbeat, the boardroom was silent, an impossible, heavy silence that seemed to stretch forever. Marcus's Mandarin cut through the air like a blade, precise and confident. He repeated the billionaire's words, translating each phrase with clarity the others could only dream of. But instead of gratitude, the room erupted in disbelief. One man scoffed, another laughed out loud. Impossible, someone muttered under his breath. The executives exchanged looks that weren't just surprised. They were offended. How could the kitchen help speak with the fluency that none of them, with their wealth and education, could muster? The CEO's eyes locked on Marcus, burning with curiosity, but the others weren't ready to see him as anything more than what they believed he was. "Stay in your lane," a voice snapped from across the table. "We don't need tricks from the staff." The words stung sharper than a slap, echoing years of dismissal, of being told he didn't belong. Marcus felt his knees weaken, but the billionaire raised a hand, silencing the noise. He turned, eyes narrowing as he studied the young man in the corner. Then, in perfect Mandarin, he asked Marcus a question, one that demanded not just translation, but understanding. The weight of every eye in the room pressed down on him. This wasn't just about language anymore. This was a test. If he failed, he would become the joke they already believed him to be. If he succeeded, he would shatter the fragile walls of their prejudice. Marcus inhaled slowly, the words forming on his tongue. His pulse hammered in his ears, the tray still trembling in his grip. And as he opened his mouth to answer, the room leaned forward, breathless, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. Marcus spoke, and for the first time, the boardroom listened. His translation was flawless, his understanding deeper than anyone expected. The billionaire's stern face softened into something rare, respect. He addressed Marcus directly, bypassing every suit at the table. In that moment, power shifted, and the executives who had mocked him sat in stunned silence. But respect from one man didn't erase the stares of the others. Some still looked at Marcus as if he'd broken an unspoken rule, stepping out of place, daring to exist beyond the box they had built for him. The applause never came. The praise was whispered, half-hearted, and quickly buried under the weight of their discomfort. Marcus returned to his station, the tray still in his hands, but inside, something had changed. He had proved that their labels did not define him. Yet the silence in that room revealed a painful truth. Racism isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides behind forced smiles, dismissive glances, and the refusal to acknowledge another's worth. The story didn't end with Marcus becoming a CEO or rewriting his destiny overnight, but it left a mark on him, on the billionaire, who saw his brilliance, and on everyone watching who realized how quickly bias blinds us to talent. And maybe that's the real question this story leaves behind. How many Marcuses are ignored every day? How many voices are silenced because of skin color, uniform, or accent? Racism doesn't always scream. It whispers. It dismisses. It erases. But every time someone dares to speak, to step forward despite the weight of prejudice, the silence breaks. So the question remains, when the next Marcus speaks,